am PLO LUMUMBA here at the Lukenya Hillside Camp in Machakos County in Kenya. Today we discuss an iconic figure, Kwame Nkrumah, known to Africa and the world as the Osagyefo, and voted as perhaps the greatest African politician of all time. The Osagyefo's history and impact in Ghana and in Africa is amazing. Yet there is a sense in which the Osagyefo ended up tragically. Tragically in the sense that he did not run the full course. We must look at the history of the Osagyefo as pioneering, born in Nkoroful in Ghana, taught by great teachers such as James Emmons Kwejiragri in Achimota College, went to the United States, met people who were to form him or to help him form and to have a different worldview in terms of Pan-Africanism. So that in 1945, we see NKRUMAH at the 5th Pan-African Conference in Manchester, and he's present there with great minds such as W.E.B. Du Bois. When he comes to Ghana, he finds that the political environment has already been forming under the leadership of individuals like Dankwa with the United Gold Coast People's Party, UGCC, which he joins. But what frustrates him is that these individuals are gradualists. They think that independence, the fruit of independence, will ripen and will fall in its own good time. So he forms his own party, the Convention People's Party, which is socialist in orientation. And being socialist, he finds himself inclined to ideas that are being propagated by individuals in Russia, in China, and in Cuba, and those spaces. Those are the people with whom he feels comfortable. And there is a pull and push within Ghana itself, so that when Ghana regains independence on the 6th day of March 1957, NKRUMAH's orientation as a Pan-Africanist is already clear. And in his speech he says the independence of Ghana means nothing if the rest of Africa is not free. Very quickly, he becomes one of the pioneers, and in 1958, he holds a major meeting in Accra, Ghana, in order to galvanize the whole idea about African unity. He does not stop there. In 1960, with the King of Morocco, they hold a major meeting in Casablanca, Morocco. And this gives birth to what is normally referred to as the Casablanca group, the group that says Africa must unite now. There is another group which has been created largely by the colonizers called the Monrovia group. This Monrovia group is led by individuals who are inclined towards a loose African unity. So when the meeting is convened, and people never say this, the first meeting of the OAU, or what was to become the OAU, was to be held either in Cairo, hosted by Gamal Abdel Nasser, or in Accra, hosted by the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. Because there was a little contestation, Haile Selassie then offered to hold in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and it was held in the month of May from the 22nd through to the 25th. Two groups, Casablanca, Africa Unity Now, Monrovia, let us be gradual. Ultimately, you have the OAU, which is a loose union which disappoints NKRUMAH. One need only listen and read his speech on that day. We must live here with one government. We must live here with one military. We must live here with one foreign policy. We must live here because if we don't, the colonizer is going to ensure that we are divided and we fight amongst each other, and ultimately we will be confused. He says when people talk about the change of boundaries He says, but why are we changing boundaries? These are only administrative. We are going to be united. In 1964, Gamal Abdel Nasser hosts a meeting at which he is present, and they agree we do not interfere with the boundaries. And in 1965, NKRUMAH hosts a meeting in Accra, and he believes that people are going to come out of that place united. He has also written a book, Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. And that is where his troubles begin. His troubles are both external and internal. Internal, there are those who are saying the Osagyefo is creating a personality cult. The Osagyefo is imposing one state rule. The Osagyefo is borrowing too much money in major projects such as the Akosombo Dam, the Tema Port. Ghana is too indebted. Ghanaians are becoming poor. The Osagyefo is not allowing traditional rulers to thrive. The Osagyefo is spending too much time in Africa. The Osagyefo is sacrificing Ghana for Africa. And therefore, this man must go. So internal contradictions are taking place. And the Osagyefo is involved in Congo in order to save Patrice Emery Lumumba. He tries to broker a union which involves Modibo Keita in Mali. So there are a combination of factors, and that is how tragedy begins to set in. And it's instructive that this is such a selfless individual that he is beginning to see a broader picture. He believes that a united Africa is going to be the only thing that will save it from neocolonization. And you only see his books. Africa must unite now. He's telling the rest of Africa. He's shuttling across Africa. But Europe and America are saying, the CIA are saying, no, we cannot allow this man to teach other Africans bad manners. Africa must remain in control. So what do? In the month of February 1966, the Osagyefo is traveling to China. He's actually on his way to Hanoi in Vietnam. And during the conversation, he is told, do you know that your administration has been overthrown? You are no longer the president of Ghana. And of course, the entire process of changing Africa is cut short. Joseph Arthur Ankara takes over from him. And when that happens, one of the most devastating things, all NKRUMAH's speeches banned. All NKRUMAH's books banned. You are never to hear nor to read anything written by Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. Luckily, he has a friend in the neighborhood, Ahmed Sékou Touré. So he comes back, and he is in Guinea, in Conakry, and Ahmed Sékou Touré announces to the world that NKRUMAH is now the co-president of Guinea. So NKRUMAH stays in that space, agonizing, as he sees what is happening in the neighborhood. Of course, the coup is in 1966. There is an attempt in 1967 to have a counter coup, and in 1966, and one of the people who are killed during that is Kwasi Kotoka. And if you go to Ghana, the airport is actually named for Kwasi Kotoka, the Kotoka Airport. After that, of course, in 1969, we have General Kwasi Afrifa. Coups become the order of the day in Ghana because NKRUMAH has gone. And the NKRUMAH legacy remains alive. And in 1972, during the presidency of Ignatius Kutu Acheampong, NKRUMAH is rehabilitated. His speeches are now to be listened to again. His books are back, and the rehabilitation of Kwame Nkrumah starts in earnest. But it is important now to contextualize, why was it necessary to eliminate Kwame Nkrumah? It was necessary to eliminate Kwame Nkrumah because the neo-colonizers had taken the view that the only way to ensure that Africa remains under their control, the only way to ensure that African resources are resources that are retained, was to ensure that Africa was not united. And at that time, it is instructive to appreciate that Nkrumah was being accused of being a communist. Ahmed Ben Bella is accused of being a communist. Modibo Keita is said to be a communist. Amilcar Cabral is said to be a communist. So Nkrumah is seen as the father figure of communism. And the Convention People's Party is the breeding ground of socialism. And it must be seen in the context of the Cold War that there is a divide where there are those who are inclined to the Soviet Union and therefore to be East and therefore Marxist-Leninist, and there are those who are dyed-in-the-wool capitalists, and Nkrumah is seen in this vein and therefore must be eliminated to torpedo the entire project of African unity. So Nkrumah's plight must always be seen in that way. And those of us who can be described as Nkrumah apologists will always be accused of being blind to the fact that he was projecting personality cultism. And I don't think so. My own view was Nkrumah's dedication, conviction, and enthusiasm entailed personal sacrifice. And this is very easy to confuse with what can be characterized as personality cultism. Nkrumah was already able to see that if in these embryonic days of independence you allow people to come with things that are called political parties and which are organized around religion and ethnicity, you are only going to undermine the state. Nkrumah was already able to see that you needed energy in order to industrialize. So all the things that we are talking about now, and it's instructive that when Africa was talking about Africa Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the then chair of the African Union Commission, South African Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, wrote a letter to Nkrumah in his grave, apologizing to Nkrumah, telling we Africans made a mistake. What you saw in 1957 is what we are implementing now. And that is why they say Nkrumah never dies. The Osagyefo never dies, because his ideas are alive today and as relevant today as they were on the 6th day of March 1957, when he said the independence of Ghana means nothing until Africa is united. That is the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa, something new always come out of it. And these are the ideas that we are trying to share in the hope that Africa will be properly understood. But let us see each other next time as we continue the discussion. Thank you very much.
The world is changing, and so is Africa's reality. Political shifts, new partnerships, and economic opportunities. And we're here to uncover why and how it's done. What do the billion-dollar IMF loans have to do with the Kenyan unrest? Are US and French troops actually withdrawing from African states after years of presence? Is Europe's so-called green agenda so green and helpful after all? Why are more and more African countries increasing trade with Russia? And how is Britain lending Africa the treasures London looted? Now, from colonial legacies and security to the future of African democracies, we break down the key challenges ahead and analyze the solutions. While the world is watching Africa, tune in with us and question more with RT International on Maisha TV Kenya.
problem number one is leadership in Africa.
What can we do for Africa? That was a wrong question. The right question was, what can we do with Africa?
What Africa do we want?
Africa had to seek first the political kingdom, and the rest would be given unto them. Unfortunately, we sought and obtained the political kingdom, but there is still a debate as to whether the rest has been given unto us.
Half of our people here are below 20 years old. Yes? Look at the average age of our presidents. It's about 63, 64 years old. We're the only continent in the world where we have presidents at 90 years old starting new terms. I mean, you guys are crazy or what?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mushabi Jr. on your screen, bringing to you a program called Maisha Talk. This is where we build your capacity to achieve your dreams and visions. One thing I've learned in life is nobody can ever tell you that you can never be anything or achieve anything in this world. Shut them down. You can achieve anything in this world. And in this program, that is what we are talking about. Principles, attitudes, belief systems, where you are going to gain a lot. You're better off than anybody who's not going to watch this program. This is going to change your life. It's big, it's fun, it's educating, it's entertaining. Right here on Maisha Television, where you choose it, you watch it, and you definitely love it.
This keeps me going on those days when I feel like giving up. Fire.
Do not want the money or properties achieved in a corrupt way.
Badala ya kusaidia watoto wadogo wadogo katika academies za sport, wewe kazi yako imekuwa kila weekend unakuja kwa matanga kutukana viongozi. Wewe ni waziri wa michezo ama waziri wa matanga na masuala za ndani.
Sasa wewe unatuambia nini? This government is going to punish you more than they will punish me.
Tuko na mheshimiwa Eugene, tuko na mheshimiwa Lusaka na mheshimiwa Wetangula.
I have no problem. I have full confidence in the agencies that we have to do their job. People are out there bandying my brother yesterday. Me, I've said, if he's guilty, aendelee.
Lakini hata nyinyi mkuwe na mshike rada. Sasa nyinyi wakati ya kufanya kazi mnasema tafuta Ruto, lakini siku ya kupiga kura mnaniambia tipping. Sasa nyinyi kweli mko na plani?
We invite you to like Maisha TV Kenya on all our online media platforms. Facebook at Maisha TV Kenya, Twitter at Maisha TV Kenya, Instagram at Maisha TV Kenya. Maisha TV now invites you to send your feedback or complain because we listen to you. You can now reach us on all our media platforms on Maisha TV Just send your messages to our social media platforms, call or text us on 0746 999 841 or send us an email to info@maishatv.co.ke. We care. We shall respond to your feedback or complaints within 14 days. Also, keep a copy of messages sent to us. We listen to you because you listen and you watch us. Maisha TV. Choose it, watch it, and love it.
I am PLO LUMUMBA here at the Kenya Railway Museum in Nairobi, Kenya, in the continent of Africa. Today, we want to continue the conversation about Africa, and we talk about the automotive industry. You know, Africa has always consumed in this area. In the early days, the cars that you drove depended on who was your colonizer. And I remember in those early days in the 1960s and up to the 70s, if it was not the French Peugeot or Citroën, or it was Rolls-Royce or Ford Cortina, and ultimately the Americans also came into the fray, Africa and African countries were always consuming. And it is the entry into the fray of the Japanese that disturbed the order, with Daihatsu, with Toyota, and subsequently we also had the Koreans with Hyundai. And all these were either petrol-propelled or diesel-propelled. Of course, one would have said that there was a latter-day development, particularly when we started having completely knocked-down kits coming into the continent of Africa. But prior to that, if you went into the haulage industry, it was once again either Leyland or Volvo from Sweden. All these were the things that dominated the African roads. But when the completely knocked down kits started coming into the continent of Africa, one would have assumed that there would be some element of transfer of technology. But unfortunately, that did not happen in the manner that was desirable, except in a few areas. One could say that in South Africa, there was an attempt to ensure that some technology was transferred, even if there was completely knocked down kits which were brought into the country, and certain components such as brake pads would be made. In Morocco, that was also the case. One can also identify Egypt, and to a limited extent, Kenya also found herself in that space. So that this appetite for consumption is one that continues apace, which begs the question, what is the future of that industry in the continent of Africa, particularly now, because in the last 10 to 15 years, Africa has become, in the eyes of the discerning, a dumping ground for motor vehicles that are no longer in use in Asia, in Europe, in the United States of America. This is why the second-hand motor vehicle space has become very attractive in the continent of Africa. But Africa is now saying, can we continue in this space? Can we sustain this space where in many ways we are dumping ground? Dumping ground in motor vehicles that are used for domestic affairs, dumping in the area where we use motor vehicles for haulage, dumping in the area of earth-moving equipment, if one may categorize them as being in that space. So going forward, what future do we see? And I see some future. And one can only see that future when one is alive to some of the happenings in the continent of Africa. Morocco has now overtaken South Africa as the home of, one may say, manufacturing. Some may say, no, they are merely assembling. And I belong to the latter group. Even Morocco is only assembling. So that if you look at the actual transfer of technology, Morocco is a leader as an assembly plant rather than as a manufacturer, because technology has not attained the level that allows for manufacturing in the classical sense of the word. South Africa continues to be in that space. Nigeria also is doing some kind of assembly, which is graduating slowly into the arena of manufacturing, because you find a good percentage, being almost 60% of parts, can now be derived from that particular environment, which is a good thing. Kenya also played in that space, and with the creation of technological hubs now, one is beginning to see certain automobiles which are hybrid, which are assembled in Kenya with different components being utilized within the domestic arena and are also produced within the domestic arena. A good thing. Uganda did something that was very unique, and it is noteworthy that this was a project of the Makerere University, and the Ugandans became the first African country to actually, and I dare say, manufacture an electric vehicle called the Kira. The Kira is a product of course, collaboration. I think the Koreans were involved, but it was conceptualized at Makerere University, and they now have buses that are applying the routes in Kampala, Uganda. What one needs is to upscale so that these vehicles are consumed not only in Kampala, in Uganda. Ethiopia has done something that is very unique in the last 2 years, almost banning the importation of petrol-propelled motor vehicles and preferring electric motor vehicles, most of which are originating from China, and I believe with some from Korea. But that does not still answer the question, which is the primary question: what is the future of that industry, namely the automotive industry in the continent of Africa? I see a future. Why do I see a future? It is a future that is defined by a number of things. One, despite the many conflicts, a critical number of Africans are being sucked up into what one may describe as the lower middle class and upper middle class. And for that reason, the demand for cars, particularly in an environment where public transportation is not very well developed, is becoming higher and higher. And if you look at many African cities, whether you are talking about Lomé, you are talking about Cotonou, you are talking about Abuja, you are talking about Nairobi, talking about Dar es Salaam, you can see the number of vehicles on a daily basis. If you go to Addis Ababa, you see the number of electric vehicles. That tells you that the consumption is high simply because it is a necessity, and because the cost is going down. It is, particularly the imported version, it is indicative of the fact that if African countries were collaboratively to get into the manufacturing space, then there is a future. And one is looking at motor vehicles which are user-friendly and also friendly to the pocket. I remember in the early days, particularly in Ethiopia, there was importation of cars from what we then described as Eastern Europe, Lada. And I think Lada must have been from Russia at that time. Then there was another car called Skoda. These cars were very well favored because they lent themselves to easy use. And I see Africa getting into that space because of an increased population, as I've already indicated, because of demand, because of population, because people are also getting into the space where they are preferring to use hybrid cars, where you are talking about intercontinental trade. We keep on mentioning the Africa Continental Free Trade Area almost ad nauseum. And the reason why we mention Africa Continental Free Trade Area is going to be one of the engines of the drive for the demand for motor vehicles is because we see an Africa which in the next 10 years, it will be possible for an African to drive from Addis Ababa to Dhaka. We see an Africa where you could be able to drive from Nairobi to Kinshasa. You would be able to take a weekend from Cape Town to Lilongwe. And when that is happening, then the demand for motor vehicles is going to be that enhanced. And all these are beginning to send the clear message that going forward in this era of mobility, you are going to ensure that you develop that particular industry so that going forward, given the raw material that we have, whether it's iron ore or whether we are going into the plastic space, we are seeing an Africa which is beginning to say these primary and prime movers of industry and prime movers of the economies must now not be imported from other parts of the world. And we are learning very well. We are learning from the Koreans. We are learning from the Japanese in this regard. We are learning from the Chinese in this regard. And I believe that with the establishment of hubs of technology and with the emergence of innovation and creativity in African universities, as I've already indicated, the University of Makerere has demonstrated its ability to do this. We are going to move into a space where the automotive industry is going to be one of the engines of Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And when that happens, what is going to happen is that the spare part space is going to be a creator of employment. We must not see these as detached from the need for Africans to have our young men and women to be employed. Which begs another question. What is going to be the role of artificial intelligence in this regard? We cannot ignore, because artificial intelligence, if it is appropriately utilized, is going to aid in the utilization of technology that is going to make Africa leapfrog some of the stages that Europe and America and Russia and everybody else had to go through in order to get into these spaces. So when I look to the future and I look to the future of automotive industry in Africa, with all the happenings around the continent of Africa, in the context of Africa continental trade, in the context of improved movement of peoples across the continent of Africa, I see a bright future. But once again, it will rest on our ability to generate cheap energy. We are not going to have an industry that is dependent on electric vehicles when we don't have energy. I have always held the view that fuel is going to be with us for a long time. It is only going to be made a little cleaner, but it cannot be denied that energy, which is cheap and therefore affordable, is going to be critical as we talk about the improvement and development of automotive industry in the continent of Africa. We live at a time when some who may be described as the climate change geeks are telling us we must migrate from fossil fuel and go lock, stock and barrel into clean energy. I belong to a different school. The school that says that it is hybrid, that fossil fuel will always be with us. And in as much as technology has seen us use diesel, use petrol, these fossil fuels are going to be made cleaner. And it is coincidental that as we are talking about clean energy, many African countries are now discovering oil. So I think that we are going to have fossil fuel, and is going to be necessary for Africa's development in short to medium term. But during that space, it is also true that we are going to have to adapt what is called clean energy. We are going to use a lot more electricity, but it is a combination of the two that is going to be the driving force. So this idea that it is a zero-sum game is, in my view, not informed by the realities. The reality is we are stuck with fossil fuel, and we are going to embrace other energies even as we continue to clean fossil fuel in order to make our environment safer. And the automotive industry is going to have a mix of both. You are going to have vehicles that are propelled by fuel. You are going to have vehicles that are hybrid. You are also going to have vehicles that are exclusively propelled by electricity. That is the reality. And I say this because I know that it is not easy to discard fossil fuel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. The conversations about and around the continent of Africa continue apace. But let us take a break to see you next time. Thank you very much.